Chloe called me out of the blue that Wednesday morning. Her tone was sweet, rehearsed, almost too pleasant, like a song played slightly off-key. She said she and my son Alex had a surprise for me. They wanted to take me on a little Mother's Day train ride through the countryside a few weeks early. She painted a lovely picture, a restored old locomotive with vintage cabins, soft music, and sweeping views of the cornfields outside Des Moines. I hadn't spent real time with them in months. My existence in their lives had shrunk to a series of polite obligations, short visits where Alex checked his watch, quick phone calls where Chloe's cheerfulness never quite reached her eyes, polite smiles across a dinner table where I felt more like a guest than family. I had grown used to being left out of things. Holidays, birthdays, even the simple tradition of Sunday dinners had faded without discussion. But this call felt different. Chloe said Alex thought it would be healing. That was the word she used, a strange, clinical word that hung in the air between us. Healing for what? For the quiet grief that still clung to me after my husband Daniel passed. For the growing distance between me and my only son. I was quiet for a beat, the silence stretching down the phone line. Then I thanked her, not because I believed her, but because some tired, hopeful part of me wanted to believe I was still part of something, still a mother, still wanted. Alex didn't call me himself. He texted 2 words later that night, devoid of any real warmth. Can't wait. So I packed a light overnight bag, just in case. I brought my lavender cashmere scarf, the one Daniel gave me on our last trip to the coast together before he passed. Its faint scent was a small comfort, a tangible piece of a life that felt increasingly distant. I packed ginger candies for motion sickness, a pen, and my old leather journal. I hadn't written in it for weeks, but I brought it out of habit, a relic of a time when my thoughts felt worth recording. They picked me up the next morning in Chloe's pristine SUV. She had on a soft yellow dress and a silk scarf tied neatly around her neck, like a flight attendant from an old movie, perfectly put together and exuding a calm that felt manufactured. Alex stayed on his phone for most of the ride, scrolling endlessly. He didn't speak much, just nodded when I asked about his work at the firm. His eyes looked tired, shadowed with a stress he never spoke of, and he seemed to shrink into himself, allowing Chloe to fill the space with her bright, empty chatter. The train station was a relic, a small, forgotten depot tucked behind a shuttered feed store. It smelled of old wood, dust, and distant rain. There were only a few other passengers scattered on the wooden benches, a young couple with a restless toddler, and a man in overalls engrossed in a paperback novel. The place felt suspended in time, a waiting room between a forgotten past and an uncertain future. Chloe handed me a thermos of chamomile tea she'd brought from home. "Here, Eleanor," she said, her smile as bright as her dress. "Why don't you have a seat? Alex and I just need to check something with the ticket agent." She smiled again, a quick, reassuring gesture, and kissed my cheek. Then she walked off with Alex toward the far end of the long, empty platform. I sat on the bench, the worn wood smooth beneath my hands, and watched the tracks shimmer in the mid-morning sun. I waited, sipping the lukewarm tea. Then I waited longer. The moment stretched, thin and taut. First 10 minutes, then 20. The other passengers boarded the train. The conductor called out a final warning. I stood up, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach, and walked toward the end of the platform where they had disappeared. I found no one. Just a small, folded note taped under the bench, placed where only someone looking for it would find it. My fingers, clumsy with a sudden chill, fumbled with the tape. The note was written in Chloe's neat cursive handwriting. It said, "If she still has her mind, she'll find her way back." And just like that, everything changed. The sweet melody of the morning shattered into a jarring silence. I was alone. The paper felt impossibly thin in my hand, too light to carry the crushing weight of what it said. I stood there on the empty platform, the words settling into my chest like stones. If she still has her mind, she'll find her way back. I read it once, then again. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was a judgment, a test, a cruel and deliberate act of abandonment. My fingers tightened around the note, a surge of hot anger wanting to crush it into a meaningless ball. But I didn't. I folded it slowly, carefully, as if it were something sacred. Not because it deserved reverence, but because it was proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't confused. Proof that what they had just done was real. The station was eerily quiet now, the only sound the soft, metallic screech of my train pulling away, gathering speed as it disappeared down the shimmering tracks. My eyes scanned the small, dusty parking lot, a desperate, fading hope that their car would still be there. It was gone. Just like that. They had left me with no phone, no purse, nothing but the clothes on my back, a thermos of tea, and my lavender scarf. I walked back inside the station. It was barely a room, 2 benches, a corkboard of faded community flyers, and a vending machine blinking a lonely red light. The ticket agent had stepped out for lunch, a handwritten sign taped to his window. There was no one to ask, no one to say it out loud to. I sat for a moment, then stood, then sat again. My knees had that familiar buzz they get when I'm overwhelmed, a trembling not from exertion, but from holding back a tidal wave of emotion for too long. I took a deep breath, not to calm down, but to anchor myself in the cold, hard reality of the moment. I was not confused. I was not lost. I had been left. The distinction was critical. This was not an accident. It was an act. And how I responded would determine everything that came next. I walked back outside. The sun had shifted in the sky. What was once warm and promising now felt hollow and indifferent. I started walking, following the main road that led away from the station. The gravel of the parking lot turned to cracked sidewalk. The sidewalk eventually turned to a dusty shoulder of dirt. I walked. The miles began to blur. The few houses on the outskirts of the small town thinned out, replaced by endless fields of budding corn. The landscape stretched wide and empty, like the pages of a forgotten book. By the time the sun began its slow descent, casting long, melancholic shadows across the road, my legs were trembling with exhaustion. My comfortable walking shoes felt like blocks of lead. I stopped near a faded green gas station that looked as if it hadn't seen a crowd of customers in decades. I leaned against the cool brick of the side wall, breathing slowly through my nose, pressing a palm to my chest to still the frantic beating of my heart. A dusty pickup truck pulled up to the pump. A man in a worn flannel shirt and a baseball cap climbed out. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if his joints were more memory than motion. He glanced my way, his eyes assessing but not judging, and gave a slight nod before turning to fill his tank. When he walked past me to go inside and pay, he paused. I could feel him watching me, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet recognition. "You from around here?" he asked, his voice even and gravelly. I didn't answer right away. I took a breath, met his gaze, and said the only thing that felt true. I was left at the station. He nodded again, a slow, understanding movement. "I know the one. Used to work the freight line that ran through there before they cut the hours. You need a ride somewhere?" I paused, a lifetime of caution warring with the immediate, pressing need. Then I said, "Yes." Not because I trusted him fully, but because I had no other choice left to trust. He opened the passenger door for me. I climbed in, the vinyl of the seat cracked and cool. He didn't ask for details, didn't pry into the story that must have been written all over my face. He just turned on the engine and let the quiet fill the space between us. And for the first time since that morning, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't home yet, but I was no longer standing still. The truck moved steadily along the narrow country road. I leaned my head back against the seat, grateful for the warmth humming through the heating vents. The man beside me said his name was Harold. He didn't offer more, and I didn't ask. He didn't take the highway, instead following back roads lined with tall grass and old fence posts leaning like tired men. I noticed he drove carefully, like someone who knew every bend and pothole from years of repetition. "My name is Eleanor," I said eventually, my voice raspy. He nodded as if he already knew. By the time we reached his house, the sky was a deep, bruised purple. It was a modest place tucked behind a row of bare oak trees, the siding weathered by years of Iowa wind. He opened the door for me, led me to an old recliner near the window, and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with a cup of black coffee and a thick turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper. I ate slowly, each bite a reminder that I hadn't eaten since morning. He let me be. Later, he set up a cot in the spare room. No questions, no lectures, just a simple, profound kindness that felt like a lifeline. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there listening to the wind, my mind replaying the pieces. The phone left behind, the note, the vanished car. There was no misunderstanding. This had been deliberate. This was an attempt to prove something, that I was incompetent, confused, a problem to be managed. The next morning, Harold drove me home. When we pulled into my driveway, I hesitated. The front door looked unchanged, but everything else felt off, as if I were approaching a house I no longer fully belonged to. Harold handed me a folded piece of paper with his phone number. "If you ever need someone to remember what really happened," he said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror, "I'm around." I nodded, my throat tight, and stepped out. The house was quiet, too quiet. I unlocked the front door. The air inside smelled wrong. Not like my home, but like a sterile, staged version of it. A sharp chemical lemon scent hung in the air, overpowering the familiar lavender from my diffuser. The rug in the entryway was slightly askew. I walked into my small study. The drawer I kept locked, the one holding my most important legal documents, had tiny, fresh scratches near the keyhole. My heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm. I opened it. The documents were still there, but the envelope labeled Property Deed Westbrook House had been moved. The seal was loosened, not broken, but tampered with. I sat down at my old desktop computer. My hands moved with muscle memory as I logged into my online banking portal. Two-step verification, security questions. And there it was, a new name listed under authorized users with full access permissions, Chloe M. Givens, added 3 days ago. My fingers hovered over the mouse as I clicked into the recent activity log. There had been no transfers yet, just the permission granted, but that alone was a profound violation. No call, no discussion, no signed letter from me. That name should not be there. I closed the laptop and sat in the armchair near the window. I thought about the way Chloe had looked at me, her hand on my arm, her smile full of a sympathy that now felt predatory. The kind of sympathy people offer just before they move you somewhere quiet, somewhere you can be easily forgotten. I wasn't just left behind anymore. I had been targeted. I went to the hall closet and took down my old travel bag. I opened it and placed inside a fresh notebook, a pen, and the burner phone I'd bought last fall after Chloe first mentioned switching me to their family plan. She thought I'd thrown it away. I hadn't. Tonight I would rest, but tomorrow I would begin. I rose early. The air in the house was thick with a quiet tension, like the sky before a storm. I made tea, sat in the armchair, and opened the fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote the date. Then I began, not with long sentences, but with cold, hard facts. Front porch light on upon arrival. Study drawer lock scratched. Keyhole tampered with. Deed envelope seal loosened. Bank account access changed. Chloe M. Givens added. Each entry had its own line, clean and unemotional, the way a nurse might chart a patient's vitals during a slow decline. An hour later, I tucked the notebook beneath a loose floorboard in the hallway closet, a hiding place only Daniel and I had known. That afternoon, Alex called. His voice had that worn-down softness I remembered from his childhood, like he was always apologizing in advance. He asked if I needed anything. I told him I was fine. He said he might drop by tomorrow to check in. I didn't ask why. I thanked him and ended the call. He arrived around 4 the next day. He brought soup from the local deli and sat awkwardly on the couch while I moved around the kitchen. "I'm glad you're back safe, Mom," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Thank you," I said, not meeting his gaze. He asked about the trip, and I answered with vague, non-committal words. Then, as I was putting spoons away, I paused and let the silence stretch between us, heavy and uncomfortable. "Chloe's been worried about you," he said finally, breaking. I turned, looking at him with a soft, practiced expression. "She's very kind," I said, then turned back to the drawer. He left after 20 minutes. I waited until his car faded down the street, then went to the front door. I had placed a tiny transparent sticker on the door jamb that morning. It had been peeled back and clumsily replaced. Someone had tested the lock from the outside. That night Chloe came. She brought banana bread, still warm. "I missed our chats," she smiled. "So did I returned, my own smile a careful replica. We sat in the kitchen. She asked if I had remembered to take my vitamins. I nodded. Then, while I got us more tea, I watched from the corner of my eye. Her gaze lingered on the hallway where the coat closet stood, the same closet where I used to keep my passport and other travel documents. I dropped a spoon intentionally. As I bent to pick it up, I saw her rise slightly, taking a half step toward the hallway before catching herself and sitting back down with a soft laugh. Later that night, I opened the notebook again. Alex visit, brought soup, avoided eye contact. Chloe visit, looked toward coat closet, distracted when alone. Then I closed the book. I didn't sleep right away. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Every detail mattered now. I had decided I would not let this play run without a script. And this time, I was writing it. The following morning, I pulled out my old microcassette recorder. It was dusty, but with a fresh battery, it still worked. I left it hidden in the guest room, the room Chloe often used when she insisted on helping me sort papers. I started moving more slowly in those days, a deliberate performance. I let cups rattle slightly in my hands. I'd pause in the middle of a sentence, a furrowed brow here, a misplaced key there. Chloe noticed. "You've been a little forgetful lately, haven't you?" she said gently one afternoon. "Have I?" I smiled faintly. She patted my hand. "We all are, Eleanor." That evening, I made another entry. Chloe mentioned memory again, gently framed, tested reaction. I started keeping a small calendar near the fridge, filling it with appointments that never happened. I left notes for myself in odd places. Once I stuck a reminder to turn off the stove on the bathroom mirror. Chloe saw it. 2 days later, she looked at me with deep, practiced concern. I saw her take a photo of the note with her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. It was working. On Friday, I invited her over for tea. I had the recorder hidden beneath the stove drawer. Later, when I listened back, I heard her voice, a quiet murmur into her phone when she thought I was out of the room. "Brendan, we just want her to be safe. Once we file, it's only temporary." We'll keep it quiet. File. The word was a confirmation of my deepest fears. That night, I did something I hadn't done in over 5 years. I dialed the number of Isabel Reed, a woman I knew from a yoga class years ago, who was also one of the sharpest elder law attorneys in the state. She picked up on the second ring. When I told her what had been happening, her tone changed from friendly to focused. "You have documents, Eleanor?" she asked. "I do, and recordings." "Good," she said. "Do not confront them." "We'll start with a freeze." The next day, I met Harold at the diner. I handed him a USB drive with the audio, the notebook, and a sealed envelope with my most recent will. He placed them in his coat pocket without a word. I met Isabel in a quiet back room at the Senior Legal Center. I told her everything. She barely blinked. "Coercive elder abuse," she said quietly. "More common than you think." She showed me a form called a preemptive protective injunction. It would freeze all movement on my estate and prevent anyone from gaining control until a full hearing was held. "We'll file this under seal," she said. "They won't even know it exists until they try to act." I signed it, her hand firm on mine. I spent the next few days at Harold's house playing the part. I went to brunch with them, laughed at Chloe's stories, and thanked Alex for his concern. Later that week, Alex came to the house alone. He asked if I'd been feeling forgetful, if I remembered my bank passcode. I said I couldn't recall. He relaxed a little. Then he told me gently that some paperwork might be coming through and not to be alarmed. It was just so they could act in your best interest. That was the moment everything became clear. He wasn't just confused. He was complicit. The next morning, before the sun rose, Harold picked me up. I had one suitcase and my evidence. He drove me to a small, anonymous house his sister owned in a neighboring town. I was safe. I was hidden. I called Isabel and gave her permission to file everything immediately. I didn't tell Alex or Chloe I had moved out. They would find out soon enough. Their plan, I would learn later from Isabel, was simple. They made an appointment at my bank under my name. Alex would say I was having trouble managing my affairs. Chloe would present a letter suggesting temporary guardianship, citing mental confusion. What they didn't know was that Isabel had already sent a certified letter to the bank 3 days prior, including the court injunction. When Chloe asked to access the accounts, the manager calmly informed her they had been temporarily frozen due to a legal notice. She tried to argue, her voice rising. Security was eventually called. Their plan had failed before it had even begun. Back in my quiet, borrowed house, I felt a stillness settle over me. They hadn't just tried to take money. They had tried to erase the boundary between love and control. And now they had run into the one thing they didn't expect: silence backed by law. Before I had left my home for the last time, I slipped an envelope under the front door. Inside, I placed 3 things: a printed transcript of the audio recording, a short, handwritten letter that said, "The moment you decided I couldn't make my own decisions, I made one." And finally, a single page from an old journal with a quote I'd underlined years ago. "When they believe you are weak, they forget you still remember." There was no public scene, no confrontation, only silence and a sealed letter. Isabel sent word that the court had approved a full block on any financial movement. I directed her to begin the process of reassigning everything not to my name, but into a new foundation, a quiet one, for women over 60 who needed help reclaiming their voice. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And peace came not with an apology, but with the decision to no longer wait for one. If you've ever felt like your silence was mistaken for weakness, or if someone tried to erase your power behind a smile, then I hope this story reminded you that dignity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just closes the door gently and never returns. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts. You're not alone.